Welcome. This is MTR of MTR Fab. This is a video about Honda ATC250Rs, particularly the 85s and 86s, which were the liquid cooled models. And what I want to talk about today is there's a lot of subtle differences between the 85 and 86 model. This particular bike is mostly 85. We're not going to talk about all the differences today. What we're going to talk about in particular is the swing arm differences, because I think they're the most important to pay attention to, because there's a lot of expensive parts in a restoration, and when you start to buy this stuff you really need to know what you got, or else you may misbuy something that's rather expensive. So let's start by, the bike is an 85. So this swing arm is an 85, and by first glance, this is the easiest way to tell. There's this stud slash dog bone looking type link, and it's a caliper brace. It braces the rear caliper. So this is how you tell that this is an 85 right up front. If you want to know what the big improvement is and why I particularly prefer the 86 rear end, is because this barrel is actually thicker on the 86 by a 1/4 inch or so, just by rough measurement. I don't know, I didn't measure it with calipers or anything, but it's a noticeable difference from that to that. And they did this because this whole assembly, the bearing carrier, or the rear carrier, is really hard to keep adjusted, because I don't think there's enough grip from these pinch bolts. So I think they made the diameter bigger, but I think the other reason why they did it is this is an offset circle inside a circle. And where the two circles are closest together, it's not very thick. And I've seen in the history of the 250R parts and pieces that I've touched, a lot of the 85 carriers are actually physically broken. There'll be a chunk of them missing out. And they may still function and stuff, but there'll be the adjuster section will be broke out. And when you take them apart, you'll notice that that's where they got the thin part. And for whatever reason, they cased it or something, somehow, some way. So there's a lot of subtle differences. The brake stay that holds this caliper on the 86 actually relies on this pin instead of the dog bone. And this you can't even see because it's behind the caliper. So the calipers are interchangeable, but the bracketry behind them is not. The bracket that holds the caliper around the carrier is different. So what I'm getting at is, if you go on eBay, you're going to notice that most of the time the 86 swing arms go for more money because they're more desirable. If you're going to replace all the parts on one of these machines, go for an 86 rear end, because it's just so much better than the 85 design, unless you're into OEM fancy, perfect original trikes. You should consider the 86. The rear housing is so much better. I'll show you where these fail, and they fail the same way whether they're 85s or 86s. You'll see a lot of fractures actually. This is kind of cool. See how this is all rusty right there? That's actual crack, and they propagate around these holes, and Honda tried to do something by terminating the crack and trying to break the stresses out, but 25 years of pounding. So this is what's holding your carrier position, other than this pinch bolt, but that eventually digs into the carrier anyway. So over time, the 85s, this 85, if I go woods pounding with this thing, inevitably the chain tension will change throughout the ride. It will get tighter, and it's because no matter how hard I crank on the hardware in the back on the 85, it will still spin under full load, running off rocks or stomping it off something and then landing hard under revs. It will almost always just rotate the whole housing. So on the 86s, I guess it's just not as much of an issue because they're bigger and they've got a better clamp mechanism. The gauge of this material, I believe, is actually bigger too. But I've bought a lot of these. I have a small collection of these. They're hard to find decent ones on eBay now, so you have to be careful what you're buying. Always look at them. The welds were pretty shoddy from original anyway, but you can usually tell if they've been, you know, broke apart and welded up. This is actually a pretty good example. A lot of times you'll find stripped hardware. This one happens to have all the hardware out. This is actually a really nice example of an 86. It's original paint, original stickers. It's got the original ProLink sticker. I think that's one of the subtle differences actually too, and between the 85s and 86s. I believe that, maybe, I don't remember if the 85s had the ProLink sticker or not back here. But pretty nice shape. You don't find these bent usually, but you may find cracks up in the necks. It's not uncommon to see stuff crack up in here. The mounts, they'll crack. I showed you with the spots where these are, you know, showing it. So this is actually, we'll talk about that for a sec. I'll show you on the 85. I actually noticed this last time, but you can see how I've left a chunk of weld there, right? So I actually cut these ears out when I took this swing arm out, ground out those cracks, welded them up, flush ground them, and then left these nuggets on top in hopes that the crack doesn't start again. There is not a lot of time on this since, and actually it's kind of interesting. I don't know if that's another crack starting under it. I think there is. So this is an example of you fix it in one spot, it breaks in another. I want to replace this rear end. It's an 85 rear end. Because of stuff like that. That's never going to end. This thing had little fractures all over it. I think at this point the metal is pretty fatigued in a lot of these. So you're only going to get so far with the 85 stuff anyway. I prefer the upgraded 86 version. The axles are easier to find. This is an aftermarket axle, and last time I took it out, I remember the splines being pretty beat up. I mean, they were still holding and everything, but they were pretty well worn out. So I kind of told myself, when they wear out or this thing just gets unwieldy, I'll replace this whole rear end with an 86 setup. But that requires, if you're going to do a conversion from an 85 to an 86, you're going to need to buy a swing arm, you're going to need to buy a bearing carrier, and an axle, I believe. I don't think the axles are the same diameter. I think the 86 axle, there's something different about it because it is a totally different axle. Got to rebuild these. You know, they've got some nice aftermarket kits now, but it was really expensive through Honda to buy all the pieces in here. There's this cap, there's a lip seal, there's a collar, there's a bearing, and then there's all the symmetrical parts on the other side of each barrel. And then there's a spacer in there too that goes the full width. So there's a lot of pieces in here, and you know, I think All Balls makes an acceptable kit, and they're like 50 bucks, somewhere around there. I definitely recommend it. The OEM stuff is so expensive, and it's really not that necessary. But if you're doing this by yourself, you probably already know. If you have a swing arm out like this, you know the effort it took to get it there, because sometimes these swing arm bolts get seized in the collars that are in here. So I don't know who got this one out. This was obviously not a Northeast strike. Like I said, I've purchased a bunch of these over the years. I used to fight for them in auctions. but I only saw it after the 86, so I literally have no 85s other than this one right here with this axle. After that's done, I'm going to buy an aftermarket axle and I'm going to convert to 886. Lone Star carrier, or you know, even some of the cheap billet carriers. I mean, billet's billet, guys. The billet carrier from Joe Blow is probably just good enough for this machine. So I might buy like $100 carrier from somebody. I know I've seen them even cheaper than that. But eventually that'll happen, so I can maybe have a better chance at a consistent chain tension. So another place to look for wear. If they didn't ever change their chain slider, you'll see a lot of damage in this area. This one's actually pretty good. See this nub? That's factory. That's a derailment nub, and you know, guess keep it from going towards the cases. I don't know how well it works, but it's there. And then maybe that's actually to keep the, now that I'm looking at it, keep the rubber chain slider in alignment. You know, I've seen these with a dent here, so I'm pretty confident that that's just a pucker from this welding scenario. So that wouldn't bother me if I was looking to buy one of these. But when you get pictures on an eBay auction or something, look at them real close. Look at them in the areas around here. Get as good pictures as you can. And know that, you know, the welds look pretty shoddy to begin with. You're almost always going to see cracks around here and or up here. So that's it, guys. Those are the important ones to know. Just know that if you're, you know, buying parts for anything in the back, whether it's a caliper, an axle, a bearing carrier, or a swing arm, you need to pay attention to which model you have. And if you're unsure, just come back to this video. But really, this is an 85 with the big dog bone, and if you can't see the dog bone, it's an 86. The 86 is definitely the preferred version if you're going to pick one. Go for the 86 in my opinion. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I do these videos weekly. I want to prevent you guys from buying something that isn't right for your project. If you want to see more 250R content, please subscribe. Thanks. Keep watching.